The question that I'd like to pose in the context of this particular event is around, is data governance broken today? And I think you'll see the bullet points here on this slide, and essentially we are really trying to provoke some thought process around the approach that has been taken historically to the data governance requirement in organizations, which is ultimately really about trying to get the right data to the right data citizen at the right time. Yeah, and in that landscape, the approach which has been widely adopted historically, which has really been the only approach available, has been centered around the data stewards, and really driving the data stewards to populate the data catalogs in order that the data that's available within the enterprise is then exposed into the other stakeholders. But really, this approach has been the sort of parallel that draws to mind for me is what I experienced in my career around configuration management as well, where philosophically the idea of a configuration management database was a great idea, but actually populating it and driving it in an automated way was a sort of secondary phase in the evolution of that particular type of technology. And we're seeing the same really with the data governance space. So philosophically, the idea of having a catalog where all of the data attributes, the data locations, the data owners, and so on are exposed, and the data can be available for the purposes of innovation within the organization. Philosophically, brilliant idea, but driving it from a group of individuals who candidly really don't embrace the manual processes of populating the catalog, maintaining the catalog, keeping it updated, extending the catalog beyond the structured data space into some of the other really key data assets of an organization, such as the unstructured data space, is really not delivering perhaps the ultimate results that the business is desiring. So with this in mind, we've kind of got a different approach, and if I progress here. I think this is a slide from Gartner from last year, and I think this also provides some evidence that that perhaps the more traditional approach to data governance is perhaps a version 1 or a version 0.1, and we need the next iteration of this to drive a degree of automation, to drive an increase in the fidelity of the available information, and to really provide the foundation for the innovation that the data presents to any organization. And we must remember also that the key ultimate outcome that we're looking for from any data governance program is really to drive differentiation, it's to drive competitive advantage, it's to drive innovation, new products and services. And we know the data is the answer and where the ultimate value sits in an organization. And there's good evidence for that as well. So I put together this next slide, which just really takes a quick look at the world's most valuable organizations, 25 years ago and today. And I think it's very clear that the transition from the left to the right on this slide, that data plays a very, very significant part. And those organizations that do have the ability to take advantage of their data can innovate, can outcompete, drive empirical value for the organization. And also somewhat an existential threat for their competitors. So whichever type of organization you're sitting in, you must be looking at these organizations on the right-hand side of this slide, which are data-driven organizations, and wondering at what point maybe they're going to move into your industry. And will they have a competitive advantage because of their ability to be able to collect analyze, syndicate, and make use of the data that's available to them. And so to introduce what makes BigID different in this domain, essentially we have approached the data cataloging and data governance process from the should we say the opposite end, in terms of, rather than coming at it from a data steward perspective, top down if you like, we've come at this challenge from the data up perspective. And so essentially what we have is an engine that drives data discovery and connects to structured and unstructured data sources, semi-structured mainframes, data pipelines, SaaS services, all of the cloud architectures and so on. And essentially we can scan, catalog, and classify the data in the data sources. And in doing so, we can extract business, operational, and technical metadata and expose that in a dynamic and automated way. And then essentially, on top of that, we are able to apply a context to that data. So understanding the relationships between the different data objects in the organization, the different data attributes, the owners, and so on, and consuming the business glossary that the business has defined, or indeed actually influencing what the business glossary could be based upon the most widely used terms across the organization, and mapping that into the data, and then exposing that again through the catalog. And this then drives the utilization of that data and the optimization of that data in terms of giving opportunities around data quality, optimizing the way in which the data stewards manage the data and expose that data to other users and maintain that data in the environment. And then ultimately we have a policy engine, and that policy engine allows you to define a set of conditions associated with the data, where if the data is then non-compliant with those policies, you can then drive resolution for things like lifecycle management, retention, or remediation, and take action, perhaps minimize that data, mask that data, and so on, depending on what your requirements are, to be able to then service the different use cases in terms of compliance, or in terms of exposing the appropriate data to your data scientists, for example. And so essentially the approach that we've got allows for massive automation. It allows for increased accuracy, increased fidelity, and really achieving that goal of making the data available to the appropriate data citizen at the appropriate time. But most importantly is that whilst we're a very disruptive technology in that context, we actually support a lot of the data catalogs that organizations have already adopted. So if you're running Informatica, or you're running Colibra, or ASG, or SAP Data Intelligence, or Elation, then the business, operational, and technical metadata that we extract and the context that we can wrap around that data is then made available within your existing environments. So we can be both disruptive and aligning with the tools to allow you to optimize the value you've got from your existing investments as well. That will conclude my very brief introduction to BigID.
Thank you very much for inviting me. And just a brief introduction, I'm Sanchit, Khandelwal, Head of Group Digital Products with National Express. And data governance is quite an important topic for us. Reason being, National Express is a group which is split in multiple business units across different geographies. Our businesses are in UK, as you probably know, National Express Coach and West Midland Buses, some businesses in Scotland as well, in Spain with the name of ELSA, Switzerland, Germany, Bahrain. In US, we've got the largest student buses and transit operations and employee transit operations as well. So with so many different business units working in their own silos, the problem with our organization is that we are sitting in a huge data lake within silos of these organizations. And when now we have realized the power of analytics and AI, we want to bring all of that data into a similar platform, and we want to do that systematically. Now, in order to do that, we decided to have some data governances in place. So I'm not going to go into the details of how we took some kind of initial stages and got into the data governance phase, but I would want to cover the objectives of data governances, the approach, the people, process, and technology, the framework, and the governance maturity model here, quite briefly. Objectives, so it is quite critical and quite vital that any organization that is building a governance model, they should have a clear objective in mind before setting up a data governance principle. Because unless and until you know what outcomes do you need, there's no point of going into the details of what do you want to do. So be it that you want to make your organization agile and nimble for technology framework, or adopting best practices for managing your data and standards, or empowering the business units or different businesses if you are a group of companies like us, implementing security standards or reusability, or adopting any new API standards or new technologies within the organization. So first of all, first and foremost, you need to understand what is the objective. Then once you have the objective clear, you need to set up your governance approach. And I am quite a big supporter of people, process, technology framework, wherein you need to identify who are the key people, what processes you want to take, and technology to support those vision, what you have for their strategies. Now, in our case, we have adopted top-down, middle-out, and bottom-up approach. I'm a fan of this because unless and until you are engaging all of the different levels in the organization, it is quite difficult to get through any of the massive program done in the organization. And especially within organizations like National Express, which are massive in sizes, you need to have a buy-in from the top, get a buy-in from the top. If things are flowing from top, it becomes easier for adoption in the middle and bottom layers. In the middle, you need to get a buy-in from and those who are going to implement the governance framework and processes within the organization, and bottom up, wherein people who are working on the ground to make this work for you. So that's the kind of approach I take, and I personally make sure that I am engaged in some way, shape, or form in all of the three levels in order to be successful for our data governance principles. Data governance, what is data governance? So as Darren, I also refer Gartner. Gartner defines data governance as a specification of decision rights and an accountability framework to ensure the appropriate behavior in valuation, creation, consumption, and control of data and analytics. What a good definition. How do we put it in use? Using our people, process, and technology framework. People, as I just mentioned, top down, middle out, and bottom up. So how do we use that? So in my organization, I categorized all of these three in different areas. Who are the people that would be joining in the data governance board? Who are the data owners or sponsors? They sit in the top down. So we have a strong top down, we have a governance board, we have identified people who are going to be the decision maker, and those decisions should be cascaded down. Then we've got middle out, which is the people who are managing data in and out, day in, day out. They are data stewards, data champions, or SMEs who know everything about data, and of course, data custodians. That's our IT team, or our database administrators. And in the end, we've got developers or admins who are actually doing the work on databases, or creating reports, or managing data in any shape, way, or form. So in my organization, I have identified those who are specified for these roles. I have named all of those people that, yes, within these business units, these are the people who are going to be the part of data governance board, or is it the group-wide data governance board? These are the owners and sponsors within each business unit. Similarly, for each and every organization within the business units, talking about who are the data stewards, custodians, and admins. As Darren also mentioned, it is quite a vital tool of identification of who are the key people going to work to manage your data governance. Talking about processes, our processes, we have defined or divided them into 4 different categories about setting up data standards, data security principles, how do we manage the data quality and accessibility. That's quite key for us, reason being, if data is stored, if some part of data is stored in US, here in UK, we don't even know what kind of data is available. So how do we make that data accessible throughout the organization? That's quite critical for us. And then overall data governance, and then periodically reviewing whether the data governance that we have set up, is that fit for purpose? Do we need any refinement? So a constant review of whatever principles or whatever processes we have set up, we do review those processes to make sure that, yes, it is still relevant for our purposes. Swiftly moving into the maturity model. So my maturity model, I've divided it into 4 different themes and 4 stages. So I've created this matrix to make it easier, although it looks quite complex, but making it easier to take each and every theme and then taking it from initiation to the BAU. So how do we do that? So talking about data governance and management, you have your setup. When you set up, you need to agree the strategy for data governance. Then you need to establish your data governance boards. Similarly, going into the proficiency by implementing those operating models, and then you go into the BAU. Similarly, for efficiency, quality, and insights and analytics, you need to set up each and every phases in details, and then move forward towards the BAU process. It is quite high level, but how do we make it work? So I went into the details of what are the different steps that needs to be taken. And those steps have been identified here. I'm not going to go into the details of those steps, but it is, in some cases, it is a linear way. In some cases, there are more than 1 steps that you need to follow in order to establish your data maturity principles. Then talking about technology, without advocating any technology, and sorry, Darren, but I'm going to talk only about the principles. So in terms of technology, I am a big supporter of utilizing the correct tool, which is appropriate for your business. Now, I do recommend, as a framework, I do recommend utilizing the 2-speed architecture, where you can actually separate your low-speed architecture with high-speed architecture. Details are certainly available on internet for you to read. And at the same time, I am also a big supporter of API-led approach, wherein if you are exposing your data, utilizing your API approach, in that case, that becomes quite easier and systematic to expose your data and functionalities within the organization or out of the organization. So that's me. Thank you very much.